Hello, good evening, everyone. Gonna wait about 15 seconds, see how many people will join the live chat. It's been a long time since I've done a live stream, and this live stream is about my favorite football team. It is, of course, about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Anybody that has been following me for a while knows that I am a huge Pittsburgh Steeler fan, and this is a very eventful year for many reasons for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team definitely at the crossroads, and in my opinion, it goes like this. And again, the name of this particular upload is the Steeler Report. One team, one goal. Now, as you know, with the Pittsburgh Steelers over the past 5 to 6 years, it has not always been the case. I mean, as you know, the Steelers have relied for the most part on the killer bees. That was Big Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback, Le'Veon Bell at the running back position, and at the wide receiver position, of course, it was Antonio Brown for many a season. Now, one of the misnomers is that the Steelers never reached the Super Bowl with Antonio Brown. That is not the case. Now, they did not reach the Super Bowl with all three people in their prime. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell was not part of the team when the Steelers made the Super Bowl and lost the last time they were there against the Green Bay Packers. Ironically, if they had Le'Veon Bell, they probably would have won that football game because if you remember, the great, and I say that very loosely, Rashard Mendenhall fumbled away the Super Bowl chance and the last chance the Pittsburgh Steelers had of bringing back another Sticky Lombardi. They have been stuck at 6 for quite a long time, and in fact, now the New England Patriots have just as many Super Bowl championships. Hey, Red Wings Hockey, how you doing? I know it's been a long time since I've done a live stream, and it's good to see you. Now, unfortunately, the closest the Steelers had gotten with the Killer Bees was the AFC Championship brutal loss against the New England Patriots at New England when Le'Veon Bell got hurt literally like in the first seconds of the first quarter in that particular football game. And from once that happened, the entire game deteriorated. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense was obviously the Achilles heel of the team. It had improved a little bit, but they were not up to championship par, especially in that game where Brady, Gronkowski, and the like picked them apart. And it was a damn shame. And it is also a damn shame that the triplets never, well, our version of the triplets anyway, the Killer Bees, never got to a Super Bowl appearance. Now, obviously, Le'Veon Bell is gone. Antonio Brown was unceremoniously traded to the Oakland Raiders. And I believe the Steelers, well, let me first put it like this. It's never one person's fault in a relationship. There's plenty of blame to go on both sides. Now, in the case of Le'Veon Bell, I do say that it is the Pittsburgh Steelers' fault, about 65% of it, in my opinion. They could have handled that a lot better, but they did not, and therefore they are gone, okay? Listen, I'm not going to have any garbage going on during my live stream. But you know what? It is what it is. Now, again, the Steeler locker room has a lot to do with what happened. And when you are the presumed leader of the football team, and I'm talking about Big Ben Roethlisberger, he has to take a lot of the blame. Because I understand Mike Tomlin deserves some blame, and he was complicit in a lot of this garbage that happened with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Remember, he made that stupid statement, in my opinion, a stupid statement, that, oh, we need volunteers, not hostages, in referring to Le'Veon Bell's holdout looking for a new contract. Now, keep in mind, this is the same Steeler organization that let Franco Harris go to Seattle to finish out his career. So this is nothing new when it comes to the landscape with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But in my opinion, Mike Tomlin and nobody else should be able to dictate how somebody goes about trying to make their money. Now, Mike Tomlin very quietly just today signed a year extension. His contract is not up until 2021, which is ironically the same year that Big Ben Roethlisberger's contract is up also. Now, again, Ben Roethlisberger deserves a lot of blame when it comes down to the Steelers not making the playoffs back in 2018. In fact, I'd hold him directly responsible for them not making the playoffs. That interception at the end of the game against the Denver Broncos when they had a chance to win it, I mean, there are high school quarterbacks that would not make the throw that Big Ben Roethlisberger made that particular evening. And then what made it worse, he tried to shift the blame on Antonio Brown. That is not what a true leader does in the heat of combat. If you are the quarterback, if you're going to take 100% of the credit, you have to take 100% of the blame. Or a simple no comment would have sufficed, but of course, that is not Big Ben Roethlisberger. And then for him to give that BS apology at the end, listen, you know how I feel about him. I do like him as a quarterback, but I do not like him as a human being. I think Ben Roethlisberger should have been traded to the Washington Redskins to get their first-round pick, which would have been Dwayne Haskins, because the Steelers are going to have to replace Roethlisberger eventually. You might as well do it sooner rather than later. But that's only my opinion. And, of course, the Steelers have their own agenda. And, of course, the Big Ben Roethlisberger is joined at the hip with one Mike Tomlin. Now, and you're right, Red Wings Hockey. Nobody that I know of, well, you know what? I'm going to be fair. Emmanuel Sanders is about the only player that has left the Pittsburgh Steelers and has had a better career outside of Pittsburgh than with the Steelers. He's about the only one. I can't think of anybody else offhand. I mean, when you look at the history of the Steelers, of course, they used up Franco Harris. Franco Harris only had about a half a season, and he was terrible, but he was on his last legs. Who else can I think of? Rod Woodson was never the same player, of course. I just can't think of anybody else. You're right. The only guy that I can think of is Emmanuel Sanders. Now, do I think Antonio Brown is going to be still a great player with the Oakland Raiders? Listen, he's going to be all right, but he's definitely going to be a malcontent. Well, you know what? I know who you're talking about. You're talking about LeGarrette Blount, but LeGarrette Blount I do not look at as a Pittsburgh Steeler. LeGarrette Blount was with the Steelers for about a cup of coffee. I'd say about 6 to 7 games. But the bulk of LeGarrette Blount's career, he's really more of a journeyman running back. I mean, he's effective, but he really hasn't stood out with one team, so to speak, unless you want to count the New England Patriots. But LeGarrette Blount is more of a journeyman. He's sort of, what's a good example at running of a running back who was sort of a mercenary? I guess, you know what, Corey Dillon, I guess, when he started out with the Bengals and then ended up with New England. But LeGarrette Blount has bounced around in the league. He also was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a little bit. I mean, but he's a serviceable back, but he's not really a Steeler, so to speak. A guy like Mike Merriweather, who was a linebacker years ago for the Steelers, he played several seasons with the Minnesota Vikings, but even he did not have the success after leaving the Steelers that he had with the black and gold. Now, this team has a chance, actually, to be much better, and I'm not going to say it's addition by subtraction, but what I will say is the defense has improved a lot for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In fact, we saw that near the end of the season. Look at the way they played against the New England Patriots. Now, I understand that loss against the New Orleans Saints was a killer, but you know what? Half of that was the referees. Half of that was Big Ben Roethlisberger yet again, because he failed in the waiting moments of that game. And a lot of that was, let's face it, the New Orleans Saints have a high-powered offense, and they're a great team at home. Now, again, a lot of that also was Mike Tomlin not having enough trust in the defense and going for it on a BS trick play on fourth down. That was a bad play by Tomlin, and you can make a case that that, in essence, actually summed up the entire Pittsburgh Steelers season. But here we are, 2019. Obviously, they're in camp right now. In fact, the week after next, I believe the Steelers will start doing their preseason games. We already know, for the most part, who's going to be the featured guys on the Steelers. Obviously, Big Ben, James Conner, and Jalen Samuels, I think, will play a bigger role also at the running back position, because Conner got hurt at the end of the season and was not the same player. I mean, obviously you don't want to just regulate. He's a young man, so you're not worried about, this is not basketball where you're going to have running usage and this and that. But, well, yeah, Jeff Reed was accurate, but anything past 42 yards, he was not accurate. And that's why Jeff Reed hasn't been picked up by anybody else. In fact, Jeff Reed is probably about 40-something. He's not going to be picked up anytime soon. But Chris Boswell was a disappointment, to say the least, last season. I believe the Steelers are going to need a new kicker. In fact, if I were the Steelers, I would have wasted a 7th-round pick on a kicker. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, he was always fun, quote-unquote, in the locker room. No question about it. But, yeah, Jeff Reed, anything over 42 yards, he was horrible. But anything from 40 on, he was dead center. And he did win a few games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, when you look at the Pittsburgh's offensive side of the football, I understand that Dallas is known for having a great offensive line. And by many accounts, they try to say that they have the best offensive line. But I'm here to tell you, the best offensive line in all of professional football belongs to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's been like that over the past 3 seasons, to be fair. When you look from top to bottom. Now, I understand when Frederick is healthy, the Dallas Cowboys have a great offensive line. But when you look at the Steeler line from top to bottom, when you look at Villanueva, when you look at Marquise Pouncey is still at a high level, Ramon Foster, and I tell you what, it was easy to get rid of Marcus Gilbert when you had a guy named Flyer take in, and he played better than Gilbert, let's be fair. The Steelers are more than set at that position, the offensive line, which, in my opinion, you can make the case is the most important position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, did they make Le'Veon Bell look good? Well, you could say that they both complemented each other, but you could tell they blocked a little bit harder for this young man, James Conner. And they did pretty well for Samuels as well. I don't think the Steelers ran the ball enough last season. I think the Steelers, in my opinion, should go back to a run control, ball first offense to help that defense. Now, the defense is much improved. And quietly, the Pittsburgh Steelers led the NFL in sacks. I mean, and that's due to a large part of having several players being able to get to the quarterback. And yes, they did complement each other, no question about it. Now, you look at T.J. Watt, who had a very good season, his second season. Then you look at Cameron Hayward, who has been the stalwart of the defensive line. Then you look at the nose tackle Hargrave, who is making a lot of strides. Now, the Steelers, if you notice, have never replaced the great Casey Hampton. He's probably the most underrated player in all of professional football all time, because you didn't hear a lot about him. In fact, that means he was doing this job because he would take on a lot of double and sometimes triple teams because he was that good. And that would open it up for guys like James Ferrier, James Harrison, those guys. Yeah, Big Snacks Casey Hampton out of the University of Texas. He's one of the all-time greats. But you never heard about him. But he did record a sack in that Super Bowl against the Seattle Seahawks, if you remember, and that was one of the turning points in the game. If he had played in a 4-3 defense, he would have been much more dominant. But as you know, the Steelers have played a 3-4 defense ever since B. Joe Green has retired. And their defensive line has become one of their strengths. Now, Bud Dupree, who is one of the outside linebackers, has been a major disappointment. And to me, this is a make or break season for him. And I tell you what, if he doesn't do well in preseason, I would not be shocked if the Steelers cut Bud Dupree. I really wouldn't. I mean, they've drafted a couple of guys at that position that they like. And I think they're pretty sick of Bud Dupree. If they're able to save some money and pick up somebody else, you know the Steelers would do it. No question about it. And it's sad because he does have ability and he has shown flashes. Now, was he as bad as Jarvis Jones? Absolutely not. Jarvis Jones is probably the biggest failure I've ever seen. Well, the lining up the nose tackle slanted off center, that actually was started by one Mean Joe Green. In fact, even though he was playing a 4-3, I mean, he did a stunt 4-3 where he would do it slightly slanted between the center and guard, which would force a double team to come Joe Green's way, and he would open it up for guys like L.C. Greenwood, Ernie Fats Holmes, God rest his soul, and God rest the soul of L.C. Greenwood as well, and guys like Steve Furness, and guys of that ilk. So he was really one of the first to do that. Curly Culp, I believe, was the very first to do it, and that's when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs. He later went to the Houston Oilers, and he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well. And he's one of those guys, if you get a chance, look up the great Curly Culp out of Arizona State University. He was a great player. In fact, Reggie Jackson, who used to play football and baseball at Arizona State, became strictly a baseball player because he took one too many hits during two-a-days against one Curly Culp. But I digress. We are talking about the Steelers, of course. Now, the Steelers secondary, until last year, let's face it, they used to be abysmal. But I'm going to be honest, Joe Hayden has been a godsend for the Steelers, and then they picked up Sutton this year. I believe the Steelers will have a very good secondary. And when you look at Sean Davis, and you look at the rookie, Edmonds, he actually did better than I expected last season. So the Steelers secondary has finally become solid. Now, they're not as gifted as the linebackers or the defensive line, but you give the Steelers you pressure that quarterback, they are making turnovers now where the Steelers did not make a lot of they did not turn the ball over enough, especially to suit my taste. Now, this is a make or break season for Keith Butler, the defensive coordinator. You could have made the case that he should have got fired after the Jacksonville fiasco 2 years ago. And I certainly was calling for him to be fired. He should have went out the door with Todd Haley, in my opinion. But believe me, if the Steelers do not make the playoffs this year, everybody's going. Haley, Coach Tomlin, Big Ben, and the GM Kevin Colbert, who, in my opinion, should have got fired after the statement that he made calling 53 other football players kids and Big Ben is leading it. I mean, that, to me, does not suit well for the locker room morale. But it is what it is, and now the Steelers have to make way with this season. Now, will Big Ben improve on the numbers that he had last year? I believe not. And yeah, that was the worst Super Bowl of all time, Jamal. That was a terrible Super Bowl. In fact, I did an upload on that, and when you get a chance, just scroll through my channel where I give a rant how this past Super Bowl was the worst ever. But in order for the Steelers to make this Super Bowl, I think Ben has to throw the ball much less, incorporate a lot more play-action passing, and give the ball off. Now, I don't believe that they will let Coach Tomlin out because Tomlin, as you know, has never had a losing season. In fact, to me, I know the Steelers did not make the playoffs. This was one of the better coaching jobs that Tomlin has done. For the simple fact, you can make the case that Le'Veon Bell was the Steelers' most important player. And with him holding out the entire season, and for him to get 9, almost 10 wins out of that team, especially with all this turmoil that was going on, he did a magnificent job. Now, some of that turmoil was brought on by himself, but I appreciate that, Jamal. I appreciate that, man. But Tomlin is a wonderful coach. He is more than a motivator, as Terry Bradshaw put it. And I tell you what, the funny thing is, Terry Bradshaw would have killed to play for a guy like Mike Tomlin. As you know, Terry Bradshaw did not see eye to eye, and in fact did not like the disciplinarian style of Chuck Noll. Meanwhile, Chuck Noll is 4-0 and is the only 4-0 guy in Super Bowl history. But I digress. Now, if the Steelers, again, do not make the playoffs, I can see Tomlin going. Now, here's the problem. Where are you going to go? Because, let's face it, in fact, in my opinion, outside of Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin is the best coach in the NFL. And remember, Bill Belichick, if you put in his Cleveland record, he was not that good in Cleveland. In fact, he was abysmal in Cleveland. He only made the playoffs one time. Mike Tomlin has missed the playoffs all of 3 seasons. Now think about Bill Cowher. Compare Mike Tomlin to Bill Cowher and tell me who's had the better resume. And remember, Mike Tomlin had to retool on the fly, just as he's done. Yeah, you're right, he is Belichick. But, hey, it's not cheating if you get away with it, folks. I guess, in the immortal words of Al Davis, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And I cleaned it up a lot for YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. But this was a short but sweet live stream. I haven't done it in a while. And I'll probably do another live stream tomorrow on a different subject, obviously. But it will be interesting to see how the Steelers will do this particular season. Now, me personally, I think they'll go 12-4 and win the division. I do not trust the Cleveland Browns. And in fact, next week sometime, I'm going to start doing my predictions, my NFL predictions for each conference and each division. So obviously, I'll be going over all the teams, and look out for that very shortly, starting sometime next week, probably about Wednesday or so. And for now, please like, share, and subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Claude White. Please take care, and God bless.